to another edition of GRA's Let's Talk Tax. I am Juanita Huber. As always, we are warmly appreciative of the fact that you've joined us today, and we hope that our program is going to help you to understand the solutions of the Ghana Revenue Authority and how you can work with them to make your life easier. Joining me on the program today, we have Jacqueline Williams. She is the Assistant Commissioner, Debt Management Division, and Peter Fraser, who is the Assistant Commissioner, Regional Debt Management. And today, we are going to talk a little bit about the Ghana Revenue Authority's debt management activities. So if you didn't think that you can owe the Ghana Revenue Authority, or you didn't know that you actually can owe them, you actually can. But to explain that to us, let me just say hi to Jacqueline. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'm happy that you're here today, because it's not often that we hear we can owe the Ghana Revenue Authority. And I'm guessing when we say owe, we can have some back money for you, right? It doesn't have to be we pay right this minute. We can have some money going back sometime. And that's what you want to talk to us on, how we can manage those debt activities. And Peter, you also manage the regional aspect
Yes.
of debt,
Yes,
debt
Juanita.
management. And,
Yeah.
and so perhaps, but let's go back to Jacqueline. Jacqueline, tell me a little bit about the debt management activities.
The mandate of the Debt Management Division is basically to collect all arrears taxes and to ensure all outstanding returns are submitted by taxpayers. The Debt Management Division has 4 sections. We have the arrears collection sections. That's where we clear all taxpayers' files. That's the individual and companies, and we would dispatch a liability statement to each taxpayer and companies, advising them of their total liability for all the years. Now, once we would have dispatched that liability statement to the taxpayers, we have the monitoring section that would monitor those liability statements, and they would send out reminder and demand letters to the taxpayer to ensure that they comply. If they doesn't comply, we can refer that case to the legal division. But in most cases, we'll try to liaise with the taxpayers to, by telephone, or we'd visit them and to ensure that they comply.
It strikes me every time I talk with the Ghana Revenue Authority, when we talk about taxes and so on, it seems as if you go all out, the entire department, they try to do everything and exhaust all the avenues available to taxpayers without having to resort to the legal section. It seems to me as if only when it's really bad, and
Yes,
I see Peter shaking his head.
That's true, Juanita, because sometimes it may not require you to go that route for legal prosecution or anything like that. So what we do is try as much as possible to have a good relationship with most of the taxpayers, and particularly if they come into us and explain their problems, we would see with them at times, but some of them, they don't really speak the truth to really tell us, well, what's happening. But we depend on third-party information to get the truth out of whatever we were looking for before we resort to prosecution.
All right. Now, when we talk about debt management and we're looking specifically at taxes, I know you just divided it. You said the personal income tax returns as well as companies. So perhaps let's start with companies and those taxes that can be outstanding for them. We're going to start with you, Jacqueline, and then we're going to talk to Peter about the regional aspect of it. But let's talk about companies and their outstanding taxes that they can possibly have with the Ghana Revenue Authority.
Okay, well, as I mentioned, we would clear the company's files as well, and we try to establish all the arrears based on the submission of their return.
So, but let me understand. So some companies, so for example, if a company is deducting taxes for their employees, for example, right? And it's possible that they will not be turning that over to the Ghana Revenue Authority. Are those some of the challenges to the...
Well, there are some taxpayers who would deduct the PAYE, that's the PAYE taxes, and they would not remit it to the Ghana Revenue Authority. But the onus is on the employer to remit that taxes on the 14th of every month. But we do have some delinquent persons who do not comply and remit it on the due date. but we have the monitoring section that would follow up on them to ensure that they submit the return as well as the payment.
So if I don't submit 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, or it just happens that I'm not submitting at all, but you know I have a company and it's existing as a company, then your mechanisms kick into place where you start that liability statement when you begin to do your own computations?
No, if they haven't submitted those returns, we can identify them as a stop filer or a non-filer.
Okay.
So what we'll do, we'll send them a demand for those returns as well as the payment. Likewise, we have the stop filer section who will monitor to ensure that the return is in, and the monitoring arrears section will monitor when the return comes in to ensure that they pay the taxes.
Okay. Peter, I'm going to come to you. Perhaps you can...
Probably I can jump in here
Right.
before I forget. Actually, we don't, in the region, they don't deal with companies. It's just mainly self-employed persons. So any aspect of companies would have to come down to Jackie's section in Georgetown. So as a result of that, we don't at all deal with companies.
So your regional section deals only with
Self-employed.
self-employed.
Yes.
So you have offices set up, or you have officers in all the regions to
Yes,
help?
we have offices. We have 2 offices in Berbice, one at Linden, one at Perico, and one at Anna Regina.
Mhm. So I want to walk this through. I wanted to continue with Jacqueline, but let me just get this. If somebody at home, you're watching and you live in Linden or Esquimalt or any one of those remote areas, and filing your taxes is not something that you hear about often, or you should be filing taxes, but it hasn't happened for whatever reason. How do I contact one of your offices? How do I get, if I'm living in, say, Saudi in Esquimalt?
Well, we have an office at Anna Regina, and you can contact, we have a supervisor there. And also, if you're living at Linden, you can contact the office there, as well as the branch offices in Berbice, as well as Perico.
All right, and your job really is to ensure that people in the region submit their taxes.
Yes, submit, and we also monitor. For example, Jackie may not be able to pick up information about a taxpayer. Because you see, sometimes the taxpayer, even though they're from a particular region, they may not file in that region. They may file in Georgetown. So Jackie may have the information in Georgetown. So when she get that information and she looked through the file, she noticed that the person lives in Berbice. She would contact me, and I will contact the officers to get in touch with.
So it's
those-
really, it's a network. So you all work together.
Yes,
All right, it's becoming
yes.
clear. Jackie.
So with our total revenue integrated processing system, we can able to identify all those persons. What Peter has mentioned is that he doesn't deal with the companies in the region. They would make their payments in the region as well as submitting their returns, but to address any issue regarding a payment arrangement or any waiver of advance taxes, they would have to send their letter to the head office so that we can review the case and address it to the Commissioner General so that he can make a reasonable recommendation.
All right. Now, if you're just joining us, we are talking this week with Jackie Williams, Jacqueline Williams. She is the Assistant Commissioner for the Debt Management Division, and she is joined this week by Peter Fraser, Assistant Commissioner, Regional Debt Management. And obviously, we're talking about how we can settle our debts with the Guyana Revenue Authority. We have those debts because we don't pay our taxes, or we don't file our taxes, or we don't pay all the things we're supposed to pay over. Jackie, just for ease of reference, can you just walk us through the kinds of things that we can owe the Guyana Revenue Authority for, either as an individual taxpayer or as a company?
Okay, the taxes that some persons owe are income tax. You have the corporation tax, corporate property tax, you have VAT, you have PAYE, withholding tax, travel voucher tax.
So all of those are things you can owe for.
Yes, some persons would owe, but
Not everyone.
Not everyone.
Okay.
But as I said, we can identify all the non-compliant persons who owe the arrears as well as the outstanding returns.
Now that you mentioned the arrears, I know that sometimes when you hear that, you can have, I'm guessing you can have arrears running up into millions of dollars. And the idea is some companies or an individual might worry, well, so for example, if they're if they haven't ever filed, and you send out those demand letters and you say you haven't paid for X for a number of years, 7 or 8 years, and then somebody thinking about it might say, oh my goodness, where am I going to find all this money to pay the Ghana Revenue Authority if I want to comply? And I want to believe, Peter, perhaps you can help us. I think everyone wants to comply with the Ghana Revenue Authority. They want to. But it can be daunting when you have to think about the sum of money you have to pay. So which of you, Peter, let me ask you then, and then I'll go back to Jackie. If I have, I have not filed my taxes, I'm late 10 years, or I haven't done it in 10 or 12 years, and I want to do it, I really want to become compliant, but I'm thinking in the back of my head how much money I will have to pay and where am I going to find all of this money from? And I come to the Ghana Revenue Authority, what's your solution?
Simple. What we do is to interview the taxpayer, advise him what to do, and thereon he would do in accordance to what the officer would explain to him. Now, if there's any difficulty in terms of finances and so, I think that based on third-party information, like for example, you may have a guy who said he cannot afford, but when we go outside, we see him with a nice fancy ride and all these type of things. In addition to that, he might be a rice farmer. But based on our information and what we see, we know that at some stage he can afford to pay. So he may come to us and say, look, I can only pay X amount. So we put to him and say, look, we prefer you to pay Y amount. And we come to a compromise at times.
And that is a portion of that, but that amount that is going to be a portion of what the person owes overall.
Yes.
And then thereafter you enter into a payment system, like a payment agreement?
Yes, it's a payment, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead, Jackie.
It's a payment plan that we will enter once they write to the Commissioner General. They may request like a 6 or 8 months, but as Peter mentioned, we will try to establish the total liability for all the years, all the tax types, and we can recommend to the Commissioner General for them to pay an initial payment, which can be like a 10% on the total sum outstanding. And when we establish their ability as well to pay, if we see that they can pay it within 6 months, we can recommend that to the Commissioner General. But it doesn't mean that if you apply, if you write to the Commissioner for 24 months, you're going to get that. But based on the review of the files and the returns and your compliance with the Guyana Revenue Authority, we can make a reasonable recommendation.
So the person can become compliant and can continue to be compliant while they're servicing that debt from whatever years they might have missed.
Yeah, well, once we entered that taxpayer into a payment arrangement, there is a clause in the agreement which says that they must keep current with their current obligations. That means that they must pay all the current taxes as well as in the agreement and submit all the current returns.
All right. So
Bonita, in addition to that, we also monitor the payments, right? Because they would say, well, look, we'll pay $20,000, but 1 month lapse, 2nd month lapse. You know, we have to monitor in order to ensure that they comply with what we agree to.
Right. So there's a monitoring and there's a compliance and there's a lot of monitoring here that's happening, and you have to keep it abreast with all of this. Jackie?
Yeah, and we do have taxpayers who would breach the payment arrangement because we also have a clause there which says if you fail to pay the first or subsequent installment, we can demand the entire debt because it's an agreement we entered into, and it's only 1% penalty you have to pay on that sum. It replaces the 2, 3, 4, and 5% based on Section 99, 1 of the Income Tax Act. So it's a deal. You just have to pay 1%.
So it's really a deal.
Yeah. So and if you breach, we can demand the entire sum, and then you would have to pay the 2, 3, and 4%.
Yeah. Now I want to ask you about. I know that there are some people who are watching and they're saying, well, Juanita, some of us don't have to pay any taxes. We still have that. There are people who are delinquents. There are people who would have started and they stopped. There are people who haven't started. There are people who, however, fall into a category of, I guess, where they don't have to pay any taxes. They kind of have easy street in a way. Do you, can you enlighten us on those people where you have waivers and so on, that they, you know, they might, certain things might be. So I guess the question I'm asking, is there a point when someone doesn't have to pay taxes? Like the Ghana Revenue Authority will say, okay, don't worry, we ain't worry about it for this year, you know.
Sometimes that occur, especially with filing, you know, because most taxpayers, they would ask a waiver, not on the tax itself, but on the filing and the return, in terms of late filing, I should say, right? They would ask a waiver. And most times, it's granted. So I think it's...
But what, I'm just curious about the conditions. What are the conditions under which those waivers can be granted?
Well, for example, if the taxpayer forgot, genuinely forgot.
But it's April 30.
Yes, forgot, right? Or sometimes they...
So you have to have like a mental breakdown or something.
Or Jackie.
Jackie.
Well, they have to provide good cause to the Commissioner General, because it's by statute. Every taxpayer, once you are above the threshold, you're required to submit that return on or before the 30th of April. And we're human, we do forget sometimes, but that's why we're there to send you demands and, you know, ensure that you submit those returns.
So we're going to go with mental incapacity. You had some sort of mental slip. You forgot. What happens if someone, say, you have cases, I'm going to just pitch an idea here. Let me see if it's going to work. I hope nobody at home tries to use it at some point. What happens if you had like a really good taxpayer, they were paying and then suddenly had a mental breakdown and now they're unable to pay? Will their taxes be waived?
Well, they have to pay the taxes. The law doesn't provide for waiver of the taxes.
So the taxes are not, it's just the filing that's waived?
The late filing penalty is being waived, and the Commissioner General can use his discretion based on the reasons provided by that taxpayer.
And especially if he was a good taxpayer or is a good taxpayer. Okay.
Those will be waived. Is there anybody in the country who you will not, even if they are put down as a taxpayer, or they should be a taxpayer based on your records or so, that person will not have to pay taxes? Let me see. I'm thinking there's some homeless people. There are people on the streets. They probably owned homes at some point in their life. They probably had jobs at some point in their life, but they're now homeless. Do you go after them to pay taxes? Are they required? Are they? What's is it waived? Do they still have to file? What's happening with those?
Well, we would not know if they're destitute or homeless unless we send a demand. They may be registered on our system, because we have thousands of taxpayers who are registered for all tax types, and we would not know your circumstances unless you respond to us and tell us what's the case. Maybe if you're destitute, maybe your family would respond to us and tell us, okay, this person is insane or something, right? So we will make a note of it or interview that relative or somebody to get the truth out of it.
Okay.
I think that I need to say this, because what you raised there, I hope many of the viewers won't take it seriously in terms of, plain insane or anything or be destitute. But what the law states is once you earn an income, you could be above the threshold, you could be 99 years old, you're required to pay taxes.
But this doesn't apply to pensioners, though.
Well, it depends. No, it doesn't apply to pensioners.
It doesn't apply to pensioners.
But depends if the pensioner is earning an income.
Yes,
the
once
pension.
you're
Under the pension. So once you're earning, if you're just a pensioner, if you're just getting your pension, then you don't have to worry about that. No?
You can be a pensioner, but you're earning an income. You have a business that you...
Right, so that's what I'm saying. If I'm just a simple pensioner and I have no other sources of income, then I don't have to worry about filing
Yeah,
taxes.
right.
But if I am a pensioner, but I have a job, I have another job, I took on some job as a consultant for something or something like that, then I'm expected to pay taxes on that.
Yes.
All right. So here's a question I have to ask you though. Is there any point when a taxpayer is not, I don't know if it could be that they're not required to, but is there a point when when a taxpayer wouldn't have to pay taxes? Or they can have it waived? Maybe you can make the
Okay,
distinction for us.
The Commissioner General can grant for waiver of late filing penalties and providing that the taxpayer provide good cause. Maybe they may have a fire at their business or a flood. An individual may be homeless. You know,
Have a disability or things like that,
some
something they were
disability,
ill.
or you're incapacitated, you cannot work, and you know they may consider based on the good cause shown to the Commissioner General.
Peter, you're going to tell me, but you need proof that this actually happened.
Of course, you need proof, because I could pretend that all of these things are happening, but in fact, it is not happening.
It's interesting that you say that, and when you say something like that, I like to ask another question. So, do you have taxpayers who will come to the Ghana Revenue Authority and say, look, I had a fire, I had this, that, or something, and I was unable, and then you do your monitoring or your checks, and it turned out to be not true?
That's right, because one of the things that our officers are trained to do is, for example, is to observe. Like, sorry,
Okay.
I was thinking about an incident in which a taxpayer said, look, man, all I have is a donkey cart. But when our officer went to where they went to, we saw a truck, some fancy cars on the house and everything. And he didn't want to pay the taxes because he said he had a donkey cart.
Oh, so this is what, this is interesting. I don't believe somebody will come to the Ghana Revenue Authority and say, all I have is a donkey cart, and they have all those things.
Yes. Especially when they cannot pay the amount of taxes that is owed to the GRA.
But that brings in a whole, that's like evading taxes and all that. So they really make it bad for themselves when they do that sort of stuff. Yeah?
That's why we would go and do visits and try to establish a lot of facts before we make any recommendation.
All right. So we know that we're talking here about the late filing. These are the penalties because you have penalties for not filing. Then you also have penalties for not paying your taxes.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the late filing penalties, Jacqueline.
Okay, once you would have submitted your return after the 30th of April, which is the due date, that's for the income tax and corporation tax, a 2% penalty is applied to the tax assessed.
Okay, so if I filed my taxes after April 30 and it was about $1 million, I have to add on another $20,000 to that.
That's
because of that.
2%.
That's 2% of it because of the late filing. So that's a penalty you have to pay. So it makes sense for you to pay on time because you're going to have to find an extra $20,000 to pay. If you are, so that's if you file late. What happens if you didn't file the tax at all?
Okay, well, if file the taxes or the return?
If you didn't do the, if you didn't remit the taxes then. If you didn't remit the taxes. You didn't file, you didn't remit any taxes.
Okay, well, what we'll do, we'll demand that return from you, and then when we demand that return, you'll have to pay 5% instead of a 2% of the late filing penalty.
Right, so that goes up.
And for the non-payment of the taxes too, that's where the 2, 3, 4, and 5% late filing penalties and interest comes in.
Okay. I'm going to have to, as we're getting down to the home stretch of our program, I want to turn it now to what are the challenges you have within the system that I guess brought on the system by taxpayers. What are the challenges? Peter, tell us about the challenges.
I think the region's a bit different too. Because some of the challenges we get is that you go into an area, and when you go there, we expect to find a particular person at a particular address. They give us that address, but then when we go there, they don't live there. Nobody knows about them. They never heard about them. So we end up not satisfying ourselves concerning where the taxpayer resides. Also, we visit taxpayers from time to time, and sometimes they are very hostile, because they feel that you only come here steady. But the big ones don't pay taxes and all these type of things, And we have other bits of challenges which I wouldn't like to mention here, but I think those two would give you a great idea of what we go through at times.
I can totally hear that you only come in here steady, and what about the big ones who don't pay their taxes? But I'm concerned about the area of not getting their correct address. How is the Ghana Revenue Authority working to ensure, or have you thought about what you can do internally as an agency to ensure that to verify those addresses when people are giving them to you? Because I can see how that can
Yeah.
become frustrating.
Well,
and really
what
can
we
frustrate
do
the
is,
process.
for example, we check with the post offices, right? And in addition to that, the telephone directory, if they have a telephone as such. And we also use third-party information because everybody in the country is cousin this and cousin that and cousin. So they know Juanita lives at 8, wherever. And when we go to Juanita home, we find that Juanita doesn't reside there. So we have to get the post office to verify whether Juanita was living there. And when we check with the post office, they don't know anything about Juanita.
But when I come to find out, do you ask for proof of address? Do you ask them to bring
Yes.
maybe a phone bill or something?
But those things sometimes are not authentic.
Oh,
you know,
Lord.
because you might find that when you check the system, the same example I was using here, you find that the person don't exist at that address when you check them in person. So these are some of the challenges.
But when have you ever found the ones that, have you had a case where this person didn't exist and then you found them and then, or you don't find them at all?
I can't recall.
You can't recall. I like that. Okay. So the challenge of people giving their correct addresses. So I guess the call is for taxpayers to give your correct addresses. And now the system is so integrated. I would imagine you have to go for your licenses and so on. But you will try and ensure that those things are now authentic, that you make sure that you give the Ghana Revenue Authority, even though it might be a scary thing, for whatever reason, make sure you let them know exactly where you are. Because you never can tell when they want to send you a letter saying they have some money for you, and then they don't know where to send the money, and you're not getting it. Jackie?
What they need to do is to notify us, because they may move from one place to the other, and sometimes they tend to forget to put the new address on the tax form that they're submitting to the Guyana Revenue Authority, because every year you have to submit an income tax return, and there is a line on that front page where you indicate your new address. So I am appealing to taxpayers out there. If you know that you have moved, you need to update that form when you're submitting it to the Guyana Revenue Authority, so the officers will update the integrated processing system so that we can generate automated letters and send it to the correct address.
Yeah, it is actually true. I think on the flip side, there might be cases where people might have changed their address, but some glitch in your system too that can happen where the address wasn't changed. But it's important that taxpayers notify. I think that has to become part of our culture and moving, that you notify all the people. You notify the Ghana Revenue Authority, you notify GPL, you notify GT&T,
Post office.
you notify all the people that you get bills from and so on, your banks and so on, to say, look, I am not at this address anymore. I am moving to a new address, and it will help you with your privacy as well. Because if you have your mail delivered to where you're not, you never can know. You never know, even though it's really an offense for you to open someone's mail. It still can happen. So you want to ensure that you alert the relevant authorities when you are moving. If you're moving to your new home, this is a little bit of advice for you. If you were living with your mother-in-law or your father-in-law, by your mom or your dad all the time, or you were renting and now you are going to your own home, it's a good time for you to, on your list of things to do, notify all of these people of my new address, and so that the Ghana Revenue Authority doesn't have to go looking for you and then they can't find you. Jackie, I have to ask you though, what are the challenges you have with, because he talked about the regional, those regional challenges, and of course with the income tax payers, but what are the challenges you have with companies, if you have any at all?
Well, some, in general, both companies and individual, some of the challenges is that they do not respond in a timely manner, and we have to be calling, sending out numerous letters, and sometimes taxpayers don't receive our letters.
Because they're afraid to collect those letters?
Those letters are registered and they have to sign for the registered mails, and we find that we're receiving a lot of mails coming back.
Because nobody's there to sign for them.
Nobody's there. It's either nobody is there at home at the time when the postman delivers the mail. But I would like.
Or they have dogs too.
Maybe.
They might have dogs.
I don't know
You never
what's the
can
reason,
tell.
or maybe they don't want to collect our mail
Right,
from the
right.
Ghana Revenue Authority. But you never know. We are there to assist you and to sort out your issue. And we would appreciate if they can sign for those mail or check with the post office, because they wouldn't leave it in the box. If you're not there, they would take it back to the post office. You can check to see if any mail is there, and you go sign for it, and you can come in and we will deal with you.
Okay. Well, there you go. You can collect your mails from the Ghana Revenue Authority. We've been, on most of these programs, we've said we've been appealing to taxpayers, collect your mails from the Ghana Revenue Authority. It might be a letter that says something as simple as a reminder that your license is due at a certain time. So not all the letters that are coming from the Ghana Revenue Authority are very scary. It might be a letter that says you didn't remit your taxes, but we just heard from the from Peter as well as Jackie, and mostly from Peter, that the system is not as bad as we think it is. If you have a problem, then the idea is to visit the Ghana Revenue Authority, find the relevant department, in this case, the Debt Management Department, and have a talk with them. And they're going to work this through with you. So it is not as daunting a task as you might imagine. It is actually something that can be done, and I think the Ghana Revenue Authority now more than ever needs everyone to be compliant. So you want to work with them to ensure that this is happening. Now, on the table in front of me, I just wanted to point you, I think so very often you come over, you come across some things that will help you. And as we're talking about taxes today, there's this book that I saw when I came into the studio today. It's called Taxes. It's written by two experts in the tax arena. And it's a really good handbook if you are perhaps you have to deal with taxes, you have a company, you want to learn about it, but it's also good for students who are, you're writing SBAs, you're doing your SBAs and so on. You want to get it. I'm not going to tell you the name of the experts right now. I can only tell you that these two men are very highly recommended, and they're very close to the issue of taxes, and very closely, and they've worked very closely with the Ghana Revenue Authority. So if you want to find out about taxes, I know now we've gotten even more so now than before. We're very socially conscious, and we're very conscious of our civic responsibilities. This is a book you might want to pick up. I hope that you can get it at any of your bookstores. Have you seen this book, Peter?
Well, we only received them today.
You only received, the books were only received today. Well, I'm glad I saw it. Do you know when and how soon it's going to go on sale and where we can find some of them?
No, I'm not selling it.
You're not selling it, okay. All right, so try and get a copy of Taxes, and I just want to say congratulations to the authors, Peter Fraser and Maurice Abraham. This is a timely, it's a timely edition. You want to check it out and see all the things about taxes. You can find it, get in touch with Peter Fraser or Maurice Abraham and get a copy. It's a good book. All right, we're going to wrap up our program now. Let me just say thanks again to Jackie and to Peter.
Thank you,
I'm really happy that you came. And sometimes when we hear about these things, we get a little worried, like we get really fearful. The fact that both of you are so calm, and you're sitting here and you're saying, we will work with you on this. We want to help you become compliant, whether you're a company or an individual. We want to help you become compliant. And we're making it easy. We're going to waive those taxes once you apply for a waiver, once you qualify for it, because these things come with robust checks and monitoring. And the Commissioner General approves it. Then you can, instead of paying all these 3, 4, 5, and 6% things that you have to do, you can do 1%, and you can become compliant today. So Jackie, thanks for reassuring us, and we are hoping that taxpayers are now more encouraged to approach your department.
Welcome, Juanita.
All right, Peter, any last words?
Well, Juanita, tax department is there for your help, so please utilize it as much as possible.
All right. Utilize the tax department as much as possible. That's the program for this week. We'll see you next week right here for another program of the Ghana Revenue Authority's Let's Talk Tax. I'm Anita Huber, and see you next time.